Thank you everybody for coming. Keep it lower. There you go. Sorry. Oh, there we go. I got it. Okay. Yeah, we're good now.
No, 1 second. Do it this way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, sure. Thank you everybody for coming. It's really an honor to have my Rebbe, Rabbi Keleman, come visit. I had 5 years to learn under Rabbi Keleman in his unbelievable kollel, the Center for Kehillah Development. And anyone here tonight that has heard anything that I have to say, any hashkafa, any idea, so I can attribute it all to my Rebbe, Rabbi Keleman. What he's done over those 5 years for me had literally changed my life. And it was not just me, it was many Talmidim that he created and developed over the years, have gone out and spread his Torah throughout the United States, throughout the world. And it's truly an honor and a privilege to have him here tonight to share some Divrei Torah with us. Rabbi Keleman always has a fresh perspective and a way to look at the world that will open up your mind and expand your horizons. So it's really something special. So open up your minds, open up your hearts. And I want to thank just one anonymous sponsor that when they heard that my Rebbe was coming, they said they have so much hakaras hatov to my Rebbe that they wanted to sponsor this evening. So thank you very much to our anonymous sponsor. We very much appreciate it. And without further ado, Rabbi Keleman.
Good evening.
Can I get in there?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for coming to spend the evening with me. What I'd like to do is I'd like to create a paradigm shift. I'd like to change. My goal would be that when you walk out of here tonight, the world looks different. And
Oh, yes, certainly. Thank you. Thank you very much. No problem.
so the way that I propose to do this is I want to ask some basic questions. Questions that are so basic that it seems even silly to ask them. And then I want to analyze them. And I want to see if when we analyze deeply some very, very basic questions, if everything changes. And that's going to be the goal. And I don't want everything to change in terms of hashkafa. I would like everything to change l'maisa. I would like us to be able to live a different sort of life in about 45 minutes, if that's possible. Okay, let's give it a shot. You cannot spend time with Orthodox Jews without recognizing their, I don't think this is too strong a word, their literal obsession with tiny itsy bitsy little details. Put on your right shoe first, you tie your left shoe first. When you cut your fingernails, it's this one, 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 this one. On certain days is better. I just looked up Shabbos, this coming Shabbos here. So, according to my Zmanim, this is unreal. You're so used to this, it doesn't sound strange to you. According to my Zmanim, candlelighting this week is at 5:28 and 25 seconds if you take into account today's actual weather. If you take into account standard conditions, it's 5:28 and 39 seconds. But of course, there is the early estimate, which is 5:28 and 07 seconds, and the late estimate, which would be 5:28 and 42 seconds. Now, can you try to explain that to somebody who's living a normal life out there? It's an obsession with detail. And the Talmud itself points out that it's an obsession. We're supposed to learn to distinguish between that which is tar, that which is pure, that which is tamei, that which is impure. And the Talmud says, what's the difference? A hair's breadth. And this is the way that Orthodox Jews live their lives, with an obsession with microscopic, itsy-bitsy detail. Okay, now, if someone would pull you aside and say, okay, what did God do? What was the idea? When he came down to give the Torah, what was the point? So you would say, L'takin olam b'malchut shakai, we're supposed to perfect the world, bring peace to the world, ethical monotheism, and then how do you put that together with 5:28:25? How does that fit? You have this feeling that God had a certain idea, he handed it over to us, and we were OCD. And we turned this beautiful ethical concept into an incredibly, an insanely detailed lifestyle that structures every single moment of our life, every arena of our life, everything that we do. Why are we so obsessed with tiny, itsy-bitsy little details? We know we are. Why? Okay, let's take that question, put it aside just for a minute, contemplate a different question. There's a fascinating halacha in Shulchan Aruch. There's a very interesting Jewish law all of us follow, which is that when we daven, when we want to pray, so we must say the words. We must articulate. It could be that sometimes we'll speak in a normal tone of voice. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam borei praise. Sometimes I'll whisper. But I always have to say the words. Now what's bizarre is the Ribono Shel Olam, the master of the universe, is Mekomo Shel Olam. He's omnipresent. He's every place. He's as much across the room as he's in my heart. And I can't just think my prayer. He doesn't know what's going on in my heart. If I didn't say the words, I didn't daven. And yet that's the halacha. Jewish law says you have to say the words. What kind of a God do we believe in that doesn't know what's going on inside of my heart? I have to tell him. It looks like neo-paganism. It's very strange. Why such an obsession with detail? Why is it that we have to say the words? I'll give you another question. When Klal Yisrael, when the Jewish nation arrived at Mount Sinai, there was a very dramatic moment in our interaction with the Almighty God, where we articulated our motto for the centuries, for the rest of history. We cried out in unison, Naaseh v'nishma. We'll do it even if we don't understand it. Now, we're so used to hearing that it doesn't bother us. But now think for a minute. Does that actually fit into our culture? Think of the Gemara. Think of the Talmud. Think of the rigor. Think of the questions. This makes no sense. That makes no sense. Attack. Explanation. Not a good enough explanation. Make a chiluk. Right. Everything has to fit perfectly. Everything has to make sense. And how did the whole thing start? Naaseh v'nishma. Can you imagine? You're sitting across from your chavrusa, you're learning with your chavrusa, and he asks a kasha, and you say, Naaseh v'nishma. Doesn't fit. And it's the backbone, it's the basis. It's the whole thing. The whole thing is Naaseh v'nishma. I'll do it even if I don't understand it. What is that? How does that fit with the rest of my religion? Why such an obsession with detail? How does that fit with the goal of the Almighty God. How do you take his moral ideal and fit that into the level of detail that we see that is legislated in our lives? Why do we have to say the words? My goodness. Rahman al-Liba, he wants our hearts. Kavana, intention is the most important thing. And I have to say the words? And how does Nasa and Nishma have anything to do with the religion that we practice today? By the way, I could go on. I have a very long list of these questions. And if this lecture, instead of being 45 minutes or an hour, was 3 days, I could give you an entire day's worth of questions, and I'm not exaggerating. But I think 3 is sufficient to make the point, which I'll try to do right now. More than 30 years ago, I had moved to Yerushalayim, and I heard about this incredible sage, this awesome gadol. He was actually the teacher of my teachers. And I heard he was giving shiur, he was going to give a class, and I for the first time, walked into that beis medrash to learn. And I remember the beis medrash was packed. It was packed. When I opened the door, I didn't think there was room for me to get into the room. It was the famous Wednesday night shiur of Rav Shlomo Wolbe. And I remember someone said to me, like, there's no seats, but go, you can stand in the back. And as I started to move towards the back, there was no room in the back. And there was some very sweet person there who said, he saw that I didn't know what to do. So he said, here, come stand here. And he pulled me up next to him and had me stand on his feet, which I felt very bad about until someone came and stood on my feet. We were piled 3 deep in the back and on the walls. And then there was this dramatic moment when everyone stopped learning Musar. It got very, very quiet. And this sage got up from the bench and came and sat on a stool, and he started to talk. I can see the scene in my mind right now. I know exactly what it looked like. And he was in the middle of his winter series. And the whole winter, he was talking about how all of Torah, all of Yiddishkeit, the entire system, Arba Chelkei Shulchan Aruch, the Zohar, the Meforshim, the Rishonim, the Achronim, the whole thing is there to train a human being to be expert in intimacy, in closeness, in relationship, in connection. I developed a habit many years ago that I carry in my pocket a notebook. And when I have questions, I write my questions down in my notebook. I realize that those questions are the key to learning anything about life. When something doesn't make sense, make a note of it. And then you have all these potential treasures. As you pursue the answers to these questions, then the treasures reveal themselves in front of you, and you start to understand what this world is about. And I was in that beis medrash that night, and as he started to speak, I realized he had answered one of my questions. I took out my notebook. I started to scribble the answer, but it was so crystal clear, I realized there's no need to write this down. I understand completely how this resolves the question. I just drew a line through the question. And within a few minutes, I drew a line through another question. And then I drew a line through another question. I came home from that Beis Midrash that night, and I showed my wife my old notebook where I had drawn lines through most of the questions in my notebook. I wish I had a recording of the evening so I could just play it for you. Then there'd be no need for me to talk tonight. But I'll try to recapture for you what happened. I've been doing, I won't call it marriage counseling, I would call it couple counseling, because some of the people are not married yet, for now more than 25 years. I have never once, in 25 years, I've never had a couple come to me whose relationship was on the rocks. That's usually the reason they come to me, is there's some sort of a difficulty. And the problem was a difference over what you and I would call a significant major issue. I've been doing marriage counseling for 25 years. I've never seen a couple that was in trouble because they disagreed over what I would call, or what you would call, a major issue. If there are psychologists or therapists in the room, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, but I'll give you an illustration. I had a couple that came to me in real trouble. And what was it about? He had started to grow a beard. And that wasn't part of the deal. When they got married, that wasn't supposed to happen. And she expressed to him, I really am bothered by the beard. And he expressed to her, I really would like to wear the beard. And this couple, their relationship was unraveling. They were heading towards a divorce over facial hair. I've had couples come to me, multiple couples come to me, over the temperature on the air conditioning or leaving the window open. And if you think that these examples are made up or trite, talk to a therapist or think about your own relationships. Think about the things that you get into fights about. And think about how that would sound to somebody on the outside. I've never had a couple come to me and say, she's a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I want out. It's never happened. And for me, the proof that all relationships rise or fall based on these little tiny itsy bitsy disagreements is the flip side. I had a couple come to me. Sweet young couple. They just got married. And I sat down with them and I said, I didn't know what the issue was or what was going on. And I said, how can I help? And he right away explained, actually, we're doing fine. So I said, okay, why are you here? So they said, we just got married. We don't want to make mistakes. And we thought it would be good to get some coaching at the in advance to avoid some of the basic mistakes that everybody makes. So maybe you could tell us some of the basic mistakes and we can avoid them. So I said, actually, I respect this very much. This sounds clever to me. Like they're taking driving lessons. Okay, I like the idea. So I said, okay, let me see if I can help. And what I did was I started to ask them questions. Over the years, I developed these questions that in a very short period of time will reveal a lot about what's going on inside of people and inside of a relationship. And basically all the questions have the same approach, which is that the person thinks the question is going in a certain direction and then it just slightly knocks them off balance, which then causes them to say something that otherwise they wouldn't have said. And then you can get lots of interesting information. So with this couple, the first question I asked was, I said, tell me something. I said to her, do you think your spouse loves you? Normally you ask, do you love your spouse? I said, do you think your spouse loves you? So she said, yeah. So I said, what makes you think that? She said, this morning, when I got up, I saw he had left me a note on the refrigerator. She said, it only had 3 words. So I said, that's it. So she said, no, he does nice things for me now and then. He'll make me a cup of coffee. So I turned to him and I said to him, do you think your wife loves you? Oh, yeah. I said, what makes you think she loves you? He said, when I come home at the end of the day, and I open up the door and I walk in, so usually she looks up and she sees me and she smiles. I said, you're kidding. That's it? She said, he says, no, sometimes she'll make me a cup of tea. A note with 3 words, a cup of tea, a smile. That's the proof that all relationships soar or crash in real time based on tiny, itsy, bitsy little things. And I can even explain to you in very logical terms why the success or failure of any marriage, of any relationship, is based on how tuned in you are to the little things. If I remember our 30th anniversary, so, okay, that's good. I mean, if I forgot it, I should be shot. But the fact that I remembered it, that doesn't mean I love her, because that's the elephant standing in the middle of the room. How can you miss the 30th anniversary? But if I remember, 30 years ago, I took her out for the first time. And we went out to this restaurant, we sat down, and I remember she ordered the salmon. And it came up during the conversation that her favorite flowers are roses. But she giggled. I remember she giggled because she said, I don't like the red roses. She said, I like the yellow roses. And I said, okay, that's interesting. She said, but I like yellow roses, but with a lot of, I forget what it's called, but the white poof stuff that they put in the top. A lot of that. And she said, I like a lavender ribbon. And if, on our 30th anniversary, I take her out, and when we sit down, right away the maitre d' comes over with a giant bundle of 30 yellow roses with a lot of the white poof stuff and the lavender ribbon. And then he just serves the salmon. So that means I care, because otherwise, why would I have remembered all that stuff? When you're tuned in to the little details in a friendship, in a marriage, in any relationship, that means you really care. Because otherwise, why would you have paid attention to those little details? The big stuff, okay, if you forget the big stuff, you're not present. But if you remember the big stuff, it doesn't mean that much. I have a few books that have sold very, very well. But I have an idea for a book which would outsell any of my books. I just don't have time to write it, so I'm going to give it to you, and you write it, and you'll make $1 million. What's the book? It's a book for how to be successful in relationships. And how does it work? It's practical. The book gives you exercises. And these exercises train your mind to focus on the smallest, most itsy-bitsy little details. And the book will contain dozens, hundreds of these exercises. 2, 3, 4, 5, 613 of them. It's already been written. And my Rebbe said, that's why there are 613 categories of Jewish law, with thousands and thousands and thousands of little tiny itsy-bitsy details. Because the theme song of Klal Yisrael is Hashem Echad, He's one. Anything that's one is good. As you move to two, that's evil. The whole point of the universe is unification. Yachad nenatzeach. And the training program for becoming one, the prerequisite to being successful in relationships, is I must practice focusing in any relationship that I want to be involved in, with God, with other people, especially with my spouse, even, and this is a relationship that's ignored very often, the relationship between the neshama and the guf, between the soul and the body, which is the third arena, ben adam la'atzmo, between the soul and the body. That intimate relationship is supposed to be just as close, and it's the exact same skill set. You pay attention to the most itsy-bitsy little needs. And you attend to them with passion. Why are we so obsessed with detail? Because l'takin olam b'malchut shaka, if you want to perfect the world, that means there's love, there's connection, there's oneness. That was the vision. That's what peace is. Peace is shalom, shalem. It's not broken into two, it's one. And the prerequisite for creating one is you got to pay attention. Sweat the small stuff. That is how you become prepared for relationships. Why does God prefer 5:28 and 25 seconds? I don't know. But that's what He likes. So that's important to me. Why do you have to say the words? So I've always loved research. Research generally, I love. I love to hang out in a library. And an area of special interest to me has always been human relationships. One of the most interesting pieces of research that I fell upon, and this is going back more than 30 years ago, is an area, it may even be like politically incorrect, could be you can't talk about it today, but it's psychological sex differences. That the different proclivities of men and women affect lots of areas of behavior, and one of them is language. Men and women speak differently. Generally, they speak differently. Now, of course, there's some men that are more like women, there's women that are more like men, it's a gray scale. But generally, when you look at a population, women use language in a specific way and men use it differently. Okay, now there's many ways in which we speak differently, but I'm going to give you one example. From the time that a woman is a little girl, she dwells in the realm of relationship, in the realm of connection. And the reason is she's very, very sensitive and aware of how far or how close she is to somebody. A little girl already can detect changes in the closeness of a relationship of microns. By the way, again, there's a gray scale. Men can also detect changes in the closeness of a relationship, but instead of measuring by microns, with men you have to measure it by light years. Because they're so aware of how close or far they are from somebody, and they can detect the smallest variations, they notice certain moves that they can make in the world that propel them towards a relationship or away from a relationship. And one of the things that they notice is that the more that they give to somebody, the more close they feel to them. The more that you give, the more that you love. Rav Dessler made this observation. But every woman knows this intuitively. And the more precious the thing that you give, the more that will make you feel close to the person you're giving to. By the way, it's nice when someone gives me a present. That's very nice. But when I give somebody else a present, that makes me feel affection for them. You want to fall in love? Give them something precious. Give them something precious. The most precious thing that one human being can give to another is themselves. When I reach inside of myself and I take what's happening in me and I share it with you, that is the most precious thing I can hand you, which is why Rav Wolbe said, if you want to find the most powerful organ of connection in the entire human body, he said it's right here. He used to call this the Machshir Kesher. But Machshir Kesher in Hebrew is a double entendre. Tarte mashma. This is a Machshir Kesher. That means it is a device for connecting. Because I can take what's inside of me and I can hand it to you. By the way, that's one of the reasons why I, like most teachers, fall in love with their students. I love my Talmidim. Why do I love them? Because I take the things that are the most precious to me in the whole world and I give it to them. And that makes you fall in love. So a typical scene would be that you'll see two women walking down the street, and they're both talking simultaneously. So now, does this mean they're not trying to communicate? What's going on here? And the answer is no, 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 no. They're both very excitedly drawing close to each other. And each one is telling the other what's going on inside of them. A couple comes home. Man and a woman. They come home. They sit down at the dining room table at the end of the day. They're going to debrief. And he says, how was your day? Oh, she says, it was an incredible day. She says, I was having this tension with this other woman, and we had this tension for weeks, and then today we were able to resolve the whole thing, and it was so good, and we felt so great about it. And then there was another one who saw that we were feeling so close, and then she came over, and it was... And she says, and how was your day? And he says, it's good. It's good. At which point she wants to reach across the table, grab him by the collar, and shake him. Talk to me. What's going on? Talk to me. Open up. She feels very close to him because she's giving to him something very, very precious. She wants him to join her in that relationship. In this way, I would characterize there's masculine speech and feminine speech. Masculine speech is usually about solving problems. We will sit quiet unless there's something that needs to be fixed. Excuse me, who's taking out the trash? No, I'm going to pay the water bill. I'm setting the table, honey. See, I'm verbal. A woman will speak even if there's no problem to be solved because she's trying to draw close. By the way, it's not true, this common belief that's out there in the streets, it's not true that on average women speak more than men. In every culture where they've ever done this study, men and women speak approximately the same number of words in a day, in every culture. However, they speak very, very differently, with very different intention. Now, I'm making it very black and white. Obviously, it's a grayscale, right? You can do 70%, 80%, 30%. People are at different places on this scale. It's not so simple. But there is an inclination like this that divides the sexes. In Torah, there is also masculine speech and feminine speech. They both exist. Where do you see them? Masculine speech is, I am hungry. I would like that apple, but it belongs to God. But I would like to eat it, so I need God to give it to me. So I say, could you please give me the apple? Borei pri ha'etz. And I that way solve the problem of moving the apple from his possession to my possession so that I can eat it. Masculine speech. Where do you find feminine speech? So I discovered where feminine speech exists in Yiddishkeit through the following maisa that happened, the following story. My teacher once gave a lecture, it was during that winter, he gave a lecture about how if you want to draw close to somebody, you should really spend time alone with them. Many people don't realize you can't have a relationship if every time you meet with a person, you're meeting with them in a group or with other people around. You have to spend time alone with somebody. So he said that a healthy marriage has the couple spending time together alone 2 to 3 times a week. That was his prescription at the time. Today, I think the world has dropped so far that if the couple spent alone time once a week, they would be doing very, very well compared to the rest of the population. But in those days, 3 decades ago, he told me 2 to 3 times a week, a couple should be spending alone time. So I thought that was so obvious that I was missing the point. So after the lecture, I went up to him and I said to him, Rebbe, I don't understand. What did you mean that we should spend alone time? What did you have in mind? So he said to me, you ever take your wife out for dinner? I said, yeah, sometimes I take her out for dinner. He said, okay, the next time that you take your wife out for dinner, what you should do is find a restaurant somewhere in Yerushalayim where there are none of your Talmidim. Someplace where you're definitely not going to run to anybody else. He said, ask the maitre d', the waiter, the waitress, to set up the table so that you're sitting directly across from her. And then he said, throughout the evening, you should whisper. So I said to him, why? So he said, don't you feel how small the room becomes when you whisper? I said, yes. Okay, so I followed the instructions. Found the restaurant where you definitely would not run into anybody, right? Told the maitre d', I need seats right across from each other. We came, we sat down, right? Throughout the evening, I whispered. First, she thought I was really strange. But we got into it and we were whispering. Okay. Wow. It's crazy, crazy, crazy. I came back to my Rebbe and I said, where did you get that? Like, I thought maybe he was reading psychology books in the bathroom. You know, like, where did you get that? He said, I got it right out of Shulchan Aruch. I said, where? Laws of dating? He says, right here. He pulls the Shulchan Aruch off the wall, opens up the Code of Jewish Law, and he says, here, in the Laws of Prayer, it says you want to have an intimate moment with God? Take 3 steps back from the whole world. Go find a restaurant where you won't run into anybody else. Sit right across from her. The Shekhinah settles in the Dalet Amos right in front of you. And throughout the evening, you should whisper. Why do you whisper? Because you're trying to create a moment of closeness, of intimacy. How loud would you speak if you knew that his ear was right next to your mouth? And why? Why do I have to talk? Because I've got to open up and take what's inside of me and bring it out through the organ of connection, through the Machshir Kesher. I have to give to the Ribono Shel Olam. I have to give to the Almighty Master of the Universe. I have to give to him what's inside of me with my organ of connection. Feminine speech. Feminine speech within Judaism. Why such an obsession with detail? Because paying attention to detail is prerequisite to being successful in relationships, in all three arenas. And why do I have to say the words? Because that is how I fall in love. By taking something precious inside of me and bringing it out through my mouth. That's how a human being is built. That's how we fall in love. If you would have a woman who's clairvoyant, she could read minds. So her husband never had to speak. So she would have to speak because he can't read minds. So she would talk and talk and talk, and she would fall in love. And he would get left out of the relationship because he never needs to open his mouth. Because the amount that you fall in love is a function of how much you use this to open up and say what's going on inside of you. My Rebbe used to say, anything that you want, you should talk to God about. Anything. And he says, what about something that you shouldn't want? He said, ask him for that too, and then ask him to help you not want it anymore. Open yourself up, talk to him, tell him what's going on inside of you. I met a woman yesterday. She's going through an extremely difficult time in life. The most serious crises that someone could be experiencing, she's experiencing right now. She doesn't consider herself to be religious. But I said to her, you know what? She wanted advice, like how do I survive what's happening to me right now? And I said to her, talk to God. What do you mean talk to God? I said, talk. Tell him what's going on. She said, I don't know how to pray. I said, talk to him. Just talk to him. Open yourself up and talk to him. She'll become involved in a love affair with God. That'll carry her through. But why Na'aseh v'nishma? We do it even if we don't understand it. That's crazy. And it doesn't fit with all the rest of Yiddishkeit. So I'll tell you a story, and I think here you'll see the circle close. I had the privilege for 15 years of teaching at Neve Yerushalayim College for Women in Israel. An amazing, amazing, amazing experience. It was 15 years of living in Gan Eden. It was an incredible place. One day, I was in the middle of teaching a series on relationships. And the topic that day was how to manage irrational requests. What happens when your spouse makes a request which is not rational? So generally, we in the West believe that when we give in to irrational requests, we're giving in to insanity, and therefore we shouldn't do that. And I had to explain that's not the case, because a human being is not a cerebrum. We have a heart. We have emotional needs. We have psychological needs. As long as the person is not asking for something which is destructive or self-destructive, so then we give in to irrational requests. That's part of who the human being is. in the middle of this lecture on giving into irrational requests, there's a knock on the door. I look over. The secretary from downstairs opens up the door a bit, and she says, "I'm so sorry for interrupting. Your wife just came. She asked me to give you this urgent note." So I go over, I take the note, I open it up. And in the middle of this class on giving into irrational requests, I read the note, and it says, "Leib, please, on the way home from work, pick up 2 bags of seaweed." So I close the note, I put it in my pocket, I finish giving the lecture on giving into irrational requests, right? I walk out of the classroom, I go down to my office, I get my valise, I'm walking down the driveway out of the building, and I'm thinking, if a person knew nothing about relationships, how would they respond to such a note? She asked me for seaweed. She doesn't say why she wants seaweed. I can imagine someone saying, she's not going to tell me why she wants seaweed. I'm not going to buy it for her. Or more considerate, I'll call her up on the phone, find out, what do you want seaweed for? Because she doesn't answer. I'm not going to buy it. Okay, practically what happened, it was in the old days in Yerushalayim. There were 2 places in all of Yerushalayim where you could buy seaweed. I get on a bus, and as I'm on the bus, the following is happening inside of my head. I love this lady to pieces. When I met Hannah, her father, an incredible human being, survived World War II, came to America, wanted something better for his kids. He discovered Boy Scouting. He took his firstborn boy when he was old enough and stuck him into Cub Scouts and then Boy Scouts. My father-in-law became the Boy Scout troop leader. When he had a second boy, he took that boy and enrolled him in Boy Scouts. They were doing the crafts and the survival techniques, and then he had another boy, and when that boy was older, he put him in Boy Scouts. My father-in-law, meanwhile, became like the head of Boy Scouting for all of California, and then they were doing these cross-country bike trips, and then they had a girl. So when she was old enough, she said, "Daddy, I want to be a Boy Scout." See, he said to Hannah, "You can't be a Boy Scout, you're a girl." So she said, "It's not fair." So he says, "You know what? You're right. It wouldn't be fair." He said, "You know what? Tuck your hair up underneath a baseball cap. You're going to be a Boy Scout." Okay. I married a Boy Scout. So I discovered there's advantages and disadvantages in marrying a Boy Scout. An advantage of marrying a Boy Scout is that she doesn't need very much. Hannah grew up camping. Like, she's happy with nothing. She just doesn't need. Okay. A disadvantage of marrying a Boy Scout is she doesn't need very much. And I had to really work to find out what does she like? What would make her giggle? And I discovered she loves yellow roses with a lot of the white poof stuff and lavender ribbon. She likes salmon. She loves carob. When I first met her, she didn't like chocolate. First woman I ever met in my life who didn't like chocolate. But she liked carob. I'm on the bus, heading to the health food store to buy the seaweed. And I'm thinking, this is so cool, right? Now I've got yellow roses. That's one thing she likes. That's on my list. I had carob on there before. I've got something else now that I know that she likes. She likes seaweed. Never knew that. I go into the health food store. I say, "Excuse me, could I have a couple bags of seaweed?" He says, "I'm so sorry." I said, "What are you sorry about?" He says, "A few minutes ago, we sold our last bag." I said, "Oh, that's bad." He said, "No, but don't worry. He says, "There's another health food store down the block." I said, "Listen, could you do me a favor? Could you call them?" He says, "Yeah, not a problem. Just a minute." Picks up the phone. Yeah, I got a guy here. He wants 2 bags of seaweed. Yeah, you got it? Okay, all set. I never heard the end of the phone call. I was out the door. I'm sprinting down Yafo Street. Yeah, I come running into the store. I say, "I'm the seaweed guy." He says, "Calm down." He puts the 2 bags of seaweed on the counter. "What else do you want?" I said, "Nothing, just, wait. And I see on the counter, he has these trays with all sorts of different types of carob bars. I said, you know what? I'll take 3 of these, and I'll take 3 of these, and I'll take 3 of these, and 3 of these, and 3 of these. He packages it all up. You want anything else? I said, no, that's it. I'll take that. I pay. I get the change. I walk out. I start heading back to the bus stop. But I think, no. And I go down to the flower store, and I start explaining, no, I don't want red. You have yellow? Yeah, I need yellow. No, a lot of that white. Yeah. No, not blue. Lavender. Get the whole thing. Get back on the bus. Go back to my house. Chana opens the door, and I said, hi. Now, why did I do that? She never told me why she wanted the seaweed. Why did I do it? And here's the key. It is not that I didn't care why Chana wanted the seaweed. Because if you love somebody, you want to crawl around inside of their head and discover everything about them. So I'm dying to know why she wants seaweed. But I'm not going to refuse to buy it for her until she can explain it to me. Chana wants seaweed. That's all I need to know to buy it. If Na'aseh v'nishma, I'll do it even if I don't understand that it's problematic. It's because I'm involved in a religion, not a relationship. And this whole system is set up to take the being, the creature that was created for relationship, that's what you are, and bring all of that potential out. And every single mitzvah in one way or another, I'm telling you, I could lecture on this for months straight, every single mitzvah in some way drags us from a world of disconnection, isolation, and aloneness, a world of selfishness, out into the world of yedidus and connection, oneness. That's the whole point. Reb Chaim Vital, the Kabbalist, he said 99.99% of your eternity depends on your relationship with your spouse. Go figure. What did he know? And of course, there are 3 arenas. But it's easy for me to fool myself and think that, yeah, I have a great relationship with God because God doesn't have a chance to complain to me. And I can fool myself and think, yeah, my body and my soul, we get along great, when I'm actually abusing my soul or abusing my body. But with a spouse, the relationship is so close, so intimate, so dynamic, that I can't fool myself. So if I've got the skill set, if I've made myself into the sort of person that connects, it'll be very obvious in my marriage. And however much I connect in my marriage, to that degree I will connect with God, and to that degree I will connect with body and soul. Once I'm that sort of person, it comes out in all arenas. If you have a Coke machine that gives a Coke for a quarter, it doesn't make a difference if the person who puts the quarter in is a man or a woman, an adult or a child. If a dog could kick a quarter into a Coke machine, it would drop a can of Coke. Once you have this midah, this trait of I deliver a can of Coke for a quarter, it doesn't make a difference who you're interacting with, and the same is true in relationships. Once I start to move in that direction, once I understand the purpose of the universe is relationship, it'll come out in all 3 arenas. So, I had a lofty goal when we started. I wanted to take something that was like so obvious, so simple, these little questions that seem so simple, like why would the answer even be significant, take those and actually try to create a paradigm shift. I don't believe that there's a Gadol b'Torah on earth. I don't believe that there's any great sage on earth today, or has there ever been in the last 3,000 years, who would disagree with this idea that the whole purpose, the whole point is yedidus, connection, oneness. And when you look at Rishonim, when you look at the classic medieval scholars, that's how they describe what Kedusha is all about. I won't go into that tonight. That's a whole adventure all on its own, how Kedusha is all about. Where do you find Kedusha? Kedushin is in marriage. Or in our relationship with Hashem. It also comes out in the relationship between body and soul, but that's another story. In every arena, this is the point. And we even walked away with some really, really practical, concrete exercises to focus on to help drag us in this direction. Those little tiny itsy-bitsy elements of halacha are not for people on the right wing or people who are OCD. It's the whole point, is that small stuff. That's the whole point. If I can focus in my life a little bit more on the little tiny itsy-bitsy preferences that God has, or the little tiny itsy-bitsy preferences that my kid has, or the little tiny itsy-bitsy preferences that my wife has, my husband, then my relationships will start to change. I have to take the wall down, though, of course, and see what are their preferences. Because I'm looking at a mirror all day. All day, that's what I see. And I've got to knock that mirror down and see what does the other want? What does the other need? And it's all in the little tiny preferences. I've got to talk. I've got to open up my mouth and open up and share what's going on inside of me with someone I want to connect to, whether that's God or people. In prayer, that means be careful. Don't just recite words. Talk to him. The Rambam says, and the Nefesh HaChaim, the Rechaim of Volozhin is Medayik, he explains that there's two different types of kavanah that are required for tefillah. In the first paragraph, and only in the first paragraph of Shemona Esrei, you have to know what the words mean. Only in the first paragraph. All the rest of the blessings, if you don't know what the words mean, you're okay, as long as you have the second type of kavanah. The second type of kavanah is from the first word of Shemona Esrei until the very end, when you take 3 steps back, you have to intend to be talking to him. If you're just reciting words, you didn't pray, it didn't happen. And certainly if I never opened up my mouth and talked, it didn't happen. And then finally, in all of my relationships, I want to find out, what are the Tamei mitzvahs? Why did God command this? Why did God command that? It would be very interesting to know. Why does my wife like this? Why does my wife like that? I want to know. I care. Why do my kids like this? Why do my kids like that? I want to know. I really want to know. I care. But their explanation is not a prerequisite to my coming through for them, unless they're asking for something destructive or self-destructive. Na'aseh v'nishma. I love you. This makes you happy? Great. That's all I need to know. It's a very simple concept. It's a very simple prescription. It takes a lifetime to actually get it. But it's something that we can begin tonight, and I hope that as everyone walks out the door, you will take seriously the concept, the very simple 3-part prescription. Give it a try. See what happens. Thank you very much.
Keleman agreed to grace us with a Q&A, so anyone who would like to stay for the Q&A is welcome. I have a few questions that were already submitted that I'll begin with, and we'll see if we have time for any others. I'm
not offended also. If people need to go, I'm already over time, so if people would need to walk out, please go ahead. I understand. Questions? Yes.
Okay. First question was, what is the biggest mistake a person can make as a parent? The greatest pitfall to avoid?
Good. Just to repeat the question, what's the greatest pitfall a person can make as a parent? So a friend of mine, by the way, I did not see any of these questions before. A friend of mine was at a wedding, and he witnessed the following conversation take place. the Rosh Yeshiva of the yeshiva in Philadelphia, Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky, was at the wedding, and he was talking to my friend when a former student from the yeshiva of Philadelphia walked in and saw his Rosh Yeshiva. And he walked up to the Rosh Yeshiva, and he wanted to talk. He wanted to connect with him. He said, how's the Rosh Yeshiva doing? Rosh Yeshiva said, I'm doing fine. How are you doing? Great. He said, he was trying to make talk. He said to the Rosh Yeshiva, I just had a baby. So Rosh Yeshiva said, Mazel Tov. How long ago did you have the baby? She said, 6 months. So the Rosh Yeshiva said, Mazel Tov. He gave him a blessing. And then the boy was still trying to make conversation with Rosh Yeshiva, so he said, maybe Rosh Yeshiva could give me some advice about how to raise my child. So Rosh Yeshiva said, you said he was 6 months. No, it's too late. The boy laughed. Rosh Yeshiva didn't laugh. So the boy tried to get out of this very uncomfortable moment, and he said, well, better late than never. So Rosh Yeshiva said, yeah, that's true, better late than never. Okay, so then give him lots of hugs and kisses. If I had to say what is the greatest challenge that we face as parents, the greatest source of our success, and God forbid, sometimes the biggest mistake that's made with children, it's they need more attention and affection than it feels like it's possible to give. When I speak to young kids, and thank God I have the opportunity to do this often, one of the greatest complaints I hear is that they don't have enough adults in their life who care about them. They don't feel the attention, they don't feel the affection. And it's very difficult because, after all, I have a full-time job. My spouse has a full-time job. And our kids are well taken care of. I mean, they have a whole school program that they go to, and it keeps them from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock at night with all sorts of wonderful activities. And then when they come home, I often have a lot of things I have to do. So I have help at home. I have some people who help me with the kids and take care of them, so I don't have to deal with that as much. But I always see them before they go to sleep, and I see them in the morning. That is a classic 21st century life. I grew up in a completely different era. It was normal when I grew up to have a full-time parent, a mommy, who was always there. And I just took that for granted. Today, a kid takes for granted he doesn't have a full-time parent, that everyone's out working. And it could be that the economic realities are such that you just can't put shoes on the kid unless you have a mommy and a daddy who are both working full-time. I'm not saying that the reality is not the reality. But I have to ask myself, do I really have to be away from the children that many hours? Do I actually have to invest so much in my career? Maybe I can back it down a drop. And when I'm not working, then I really got to pay attention to them. This is really, really dangerous. I advise all my students, if you don't know how to turn this off, you're not allowed to turn it on. And today, people get angry at me because my phone is off. I just don't respond. But I have much more responsibility now than I've ever had in my life. Not only do I have a bunch of kids, I have a bunch of grandkids. That's the future. That is the most important thing in life, those kids and grandkids. And it doesn't last forever. How much time do we actually have to invest in our kids with this level of attention and affection? How much time do we have? The reality is, by the time the kid is 15 today, he doesn't need you. And if you haven't gotten the message in by the time he's 15, he's not going to get it. So when that child is born, and 1 and 2 and 3, that's the time. You can develop a career later. My father-in-law, Alav Shalom, tremendous human being, Holocaust survivor. He worked as a plumber, became a plumbing contractor. There came a point where a giant investor came to him and said, I want to turn your plumbing business into a chain. It would have multiplied his annual earnings by 1,000. And my father-in-law thought about it carefully, and a few days later came back and told the investors, I can't do it because if my business becomes bigger and I'm making that much money, I won't be able to spend time with my kids. He wanted to spend time with his kids on Boy Scouting trips. He wanted to sit around the dinner table with them. My wife grew up in such a home. My wife was extremely advanced in her career at the time that we got married. Very, very successful. And she continued to practice her career until she had her first baby. And that was it. I never said I want this or that. I actually had no idea what I wanted. She said, that's it, I'm done. We lived a family of 7 in a 600 square foot apartment with 1 restroom. Not all of my kids had a bed. All of my kids shared beds. It was always 2 people to a bed. They slept feet to feet. That's how my kids grew up. So happy, so happy with us present. And when my wife, she started when she was 55, she went and got her master's, her PhD. She became a professor at YU, and she now supervises people in social work. She has an amazing career. She's a professor. She's a big professional. She did everything at the right time. When the kids needed her, she was there. When the kids grew up, they were off on their own, then she started to pursue a career. Exactly backwards of the way that it's done today. I'm not recommending only our model, but I'm saying that we can make radical decisions and we might get a different result from the thing that will cause us the most pain or the most pleasure in life. It's not by accident they call kids nachas. And again, I'm not recommending something extreme. It could be that today what I'm describing is impossible. Fine, so we approximate it. We do as much as we can for our kids. We spend as much time giving them as many hugs and kisses as possible, as much time with them as possible. But that is going to be what really counts in life. That will create great human beings for the next generation.
The next question was, in terms of the lecture that he gave, that we understand that all the commandments that God gave us are part of this relationship. How do we know that the rabbis who gave us so many more commands and built fence on top of fence on top of fence understood that relationship? Maybe God will ultimately say, you guys got really carried away. Excellent.
Very good question. The question is, I understand that God said this is required, that's forbidden, but the rabbis created fence law after fence law after fence law. What does that have to do with relationship? What is that all about? It's $1 billion question. $1 billion question. It strikes right at the heart of the issue. Years ago, a friend of mine and I decided we wanted to climb the highest mountain in the continental United States, Mount Whitney, California. So we were both campers. We figured if you know how to camp, you probably know how to climb a giant mountain. So we got our backpacks. We packed them up with enough food to make it up to the top and down to the bottom. We figured one day up, one day down. How long could it take? Later on, I actually read the book about how to climb Mount Whitney, and they say that if you do it in less than 3 days, you'll die. we went out on the trail. We very foolishly ascended up to 14,000 feet on the first day. And my head was spinning, my stomach was upside down, and I remember we camped out at the base, but right below the summit, and I said, oh, only 30% of the people who climb Whitney Summit anyways, most of them don't make it to the top. And I said, I'm part of the 70%, I'm not going to make it. I'm not feeling good. And he said, oh, you'll see how you feel in the morning. And in the morning, I felt gefährlich. I felt terrible. But I said, you know what? It's Mount Whitney. When am I ever going to come back here again? I'm going to give it a try. I put on my backpack, and I said to him, listen, you go. I'm going to walk slow. We'll see what happens. So we started walking together, and after half an hour, I couldn't keep up, and he left. My friend went up to the top. Meanwhile, I'm climbing, I'm dizzy, my eyes are blurry. Hours are going by. I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. And I get up to this ridge, and I'm walking up this ridge, and I'm breathing like I'm sprinting, even though I'm walking slowly. And at the top of this ridge, I see this giant granite area, this area that's sort of like a driveway that goes up to an edge. And I realize I must have made it. And again, my eyes are blurry. I can't even see exactly where I am. And I'm walking up this giant driveway at the top. And I see the edge. Like, that's it. That's the highest point. And then I see what looks like a figure sitting in front of me. And as I get closer and closer to him, I see it's my friend. And he's sitting there. And I walk up to him, and I look at him, and at the moment that I look at him, I realize he is sitting, dangling his legs over a 2,000-foot drop, and my toes are on the edge of that drop. At which point, I expressed some words of concern to him. And then I slowly got down on my knees, backed up, and walked away. I was so upset with him. I wasn't upset because I could have died. I was upset because he demonstrated terrible, terrible values. What do I mean terrible values? If you value life, how far do you step back from death? Like, if you value life, maybe like staying 3 feet from the edge would be a reasonable thing. If you value life a lot, maybe 10 feet. When I married Hannah, she heard somehow that I didn't like what it looked like when people chew bubble gum. I always thought when someone's chewing bubble gum, it looks like they're a kosher animal. And she heard that. She didn't stop chewing bubble gum in front of me. She stopped chewing bubble gum because she thought it would bug me. And if something is going to bug the person that you love, you step back from it. I remember when our first child was born, he was a little boy, and he was so fun, and I used to have such a good time with him. And one of the things that would make him giggle would be I would throw him up in the air and then catch him and throw him up in the air. And my wife was like, "What are you doing? Stop that." Now, it's actually not a problem to throw your child in the air as long as you catch him each time. That's what I would call deraisa. The halacha is, the deraisa is, what God said at Mount Sinai is, don't kill the kid. Don't fall off the cliff. But the way that you show that you love the person, the way you show that you love your significant other, is by stepping back a little bit from the thing that drives them crazy. And the further that I step back, the more I'm showing, I really, really don't want to make you crazy. I'm not even going to chew gum. I'm not going to throw the kid in the air at all. And I'm certainly going to stay 10 feet or more away from the edge of Mount Whitney. If a person violates the commandments, they're suicidal. But if a person ignores the rabbinic principles, They're not aware they're involved in a relationship. Again, it's the exact same principle. Because the whole thing is the relationship. And in relationships, we step back from those things that make our beloved crazy. Now, of course, you have to be careful how far you step back. Because you can destroy your life. You can destroy your spouse's life. You can mess up everything. So there are limits. You need really, really wise people to say, step back 3 feet or 10 feet or whatever it is. And that's what the rabbis did. They're very, very careful. And we're not big on people being super machmir, going way beyond rabbinical law. We're not into that. Because you can really do a lot of damage. The Mesilas Yesharim, the Path of Just, writes about this. You need a heter. You need permission, rabbinical permission, if you want to be more machmir, if you want to be stricter than the law. But rabbinical law, that's relationship, man. That's relationship.
What is the best way to be mekarev our non-religious relatives? I think this is the last one that we have time for.
Good. Well, stop with this. I'm going to say something. This is the first thing I'm saying tonight, which I know that there are very, very big people in the world who disagree with me about this. And so I don't mean to contradict any of them. This is just my opinion. I think that there's a very widespread Yetzer Hara, a very widespread destructive inclination to want to control other people's lives. Just like we have other inclinations that are destructive. That's a very, very destructive inclination. I want someone to do what I want them to do. And the truth is, I don't know for certain what their nisayon in life is. I don't know what their test is. I actually don't know exactly what God wants of them. I don't know. What I can say is that I've worked through this issue, and I got clarity that this is the right thing for me to do. And these are the reasons it's the right thing for me to do. And you should do whatever you think is the right thing to do. But I have no desire to have you come and live a different life. That's up to you. You decide. You are the only one who decides how you live your life. And I have respect for whatever decision you make. Live your life however you feel it's fit to live it. What will I do? I will live my life in the way that I feel is the most fit to live it, without imposing that on anybody else. And if there's anything about my life that you have questions about, you want me to explain, I'm happy to do that. And if you like anything that I'm doing, you're welcome to adopt it. And if you don't, I'm not offended. The idea that my job in life is to make sure that this person starts behaving in these ways seems to me haughty. It's as if I knew what God wanted of them. And I've met enough people in life to know. I've had enough deep discussions with people to know that I really, really, really can't tell what God wants of this particular individual, what his particular nisayon is, where he was at the Chet of Adam Rishon, what God set up for him in this world. So for that reason, I think we should live the very, very best life we can live. We should be creatures of closeness and relationship, and we should be a friendly Kiddush Hashem. And we should show a lot of respect for other people. And then whatever people decide, they decide. Have a good evening. Thank you very much for welcoming me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Real
my
pleasure.
pleasure. My pleasure.